Welcome to The Treatment, which you can also hear at kcrw.com. 20 years ago, a little film called Reservoir Dogs scared people to death and excited them and drew them to movie theaters and changed an art form. In the intervening years, my guest, writer, director, sometimes actor, Quentin Tarantino, has made films such as, shall we go over them, Quentin?
Please, feel free.
Well, we'll go, let's say there's Pulp Fiction, Four Rooms, Jackie Brown, a little two-parter called Kill Bill Part 1 and Part 2, Death Proof, Inglourious Basterds, The Last Time You Were Here, and your most recent film is Django Unchained. One of the things, before we get into Django, I wrote a piece recently for a magazine that plays very much in what all the movies have been, but Django in particular, about how food is used for power in your movies.
Well, you know, it's actually funny. It was, I think when Edgar Wright read the script for Inglourious Basterds, he goes, well, one of the things that I loved is the way you have the Nazis just luxuriating in these French restaurants. Like they're just gluttons with their pâté and their creme brulee. And, yeah, no, it's funny, though, because I don't actually think I would have written in the case of, like, say, this movie. One of the things is Calvin Candy.
The Slave on a Plate by Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, exactly. He's always indulging his sweet tooth throughout the whole movie. And he's got these
horrible teeth.
Jacked up teeth, yeah.
We call it British pop stars.
Right, exactly. Now, I never would have written anything as obvious as, oh, guess what? Calvin Candy eats a lot of candy. Yet, Leo just kept ingesting sweet crap throughout the whole making of the movie for his character. And while I think that would have been an obvious idea, writing it down and actually trying to do it as a metaphor for the character, in practice, it was just delicious.
But it almost makes sense for the character because he almost is a lot of times having sugar reactions, like sugar highs and sugar crashes.
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, he could definitely take the Twinkie defense.
But I love that for you, and I wonder where this comes from, this thing that food becomes this real metaphor for the way power is used in the movie, the way people exert power. The scene where Sam Jackson comes in Pulp Fiction and basically jacks the Kahuna burger.
Right,
I mean,
exactly,
and sort of and from then on, food really exists in these movies for you as a way that power is conveyed.
I think it just always associated, like, getting to know somebody, trading back and forth information, finding out if you're compatible, anything like that always happens over restaurants and dinners. I've always found restaurant scenes to be kind of ritualistic. And usually inside of those rituals becomes, I've never thought about it exactly the way you're saying as far as this power thing, but it happens because I have rituals play out. And some of them are the rituals of the balance of power shifting. Or being established.
They're always about either that establishment of power, somebody basically and establishing of power over food.
Yeah.
And a sort of consequence of that, or constant of that rather, is that people eat in your movies. Often when people sit down in restaurants and many other movies, they don't eat.
I'm a big, it really, really bugs me when I watch actors avoid eating in scenes because they don't want to have to, do 9 takes where they're, eating the donut. I eat 9 different donuts. I don't, and I even you even hear them talking about it on the commentaries. Oh boy, so and so. I didn't eat any donuts, so I didn't have to. But Eric Stoltz, he took a bite of that one, and he had to eat 8 donuts. Poor guy. And it's like that's just BS. You have to indulge. You have to eat, and if you're supposed to enjoy it, it should make me hungry. I actually do kind of like, and then this is not apropos to anything that we're, per se, but I do like the fact that when you see my movies, there might be one drink or one piece of food that the audience fixates on, and the movie actually makes them hungry for that. They want that once they get out of the theater. When you watch Jackie Brown, you want a screwdriver. You want to have some orange juice and vodka, like Gordell. You're ready for it. I defy anyone to not want strudel when you see Inglourious Basterds. It doesn't mean, it doesn't matter that just this Nazi guy's eating it. It's like, man, that strudel looks good. Same thing for the nachos in Death Proof. You just want them. But it's interesting what you're saying about the power because it's like in every way, shape, and form, Jules coming in there as this black male, just completely dominating this room of younger white males by taking a bite out of the guy's hamburger. What's like the one thing you never do? You don't offer your hamburger for a stranger to take a big bite right out the middle of it. You don't do that. You could offer fries. There's all kinds of pizza. There's all kinds of things you could offer up to a stranger. But to take a bite right out of the middle of your burger is just not done. He took it. He took it from him.
Were you aware, in writing that, you basically knew that this is Jules basically planting a flag in this room and saying, this is my room now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, oddly enough, you know where that sequence actually kind of came from? The initial intention of trying to sit down and write it, I don't even think it plays like what I started it out as at all. It took its own life form. But the thing that made me start that big scene where like all the dialogue would kind of just be manipulating this whole event, in a way that was me at the very, very beginning until it became something else. It was me trying to write like a John Cassavetes big improv, big dialogue-driven improv sequence, set piece that would happen in a lot of his movies.
And that would be like Ben Gazzara in Husbands, the way he takes over the scene.
That was me trying to write one of his wild improv set pieces, but try to do it on paper. Because what had happened is I had never, except for maybe Gloria, I had never really seen any John Cassavetes movies before because they had actually been out of circulation for all through the 80s. I mean, they never had retrospectives. Now they have them all the time, but they didn't then for a long time. Those prints weren't available. Then in 92, when I went to Paris for the first time, I was spending some time there, loving it. Gerard Depardieu had re-released all of Cassavetes' movies in Paris. He had a big re-release. He bought the rights to them.
That's right. He played them all the Cinematheque then.
Yeah, and he bought all the rights to them, created these new really groovy posters for them. And so literally, pretty much every John Cassavetes movie was playing in Paris at the time. Mini Moskowitz was playing in a theater over here. On Rue Champignon, on Monday and Tuesday was Husbands and Opening Night, and Wednesday through Thursday, 2 other ones. Anyway, I had never seen them before, so no time like the present. So I went and saw them all in the course of like 5 days. And it was a little too much in a very short span of time. I felt like I was on a vacation with them. And they were like my effed up family, and I was stuck with them in Paris. I thought I was vacationing with Lady Rollins, But the thing is, it was very interesting, and so that sequence. I mean, it doesn't seem like the finished product, but the thing that started it was the idea of that high flying improvisational set piece, but trying to do it on paper, as opposed to just conjuring it up with actors and just seeing where it goes.
Welcome to Living with the Cassavetes. It's also known as The Treatment. My guest is Quentin Tarantino. His new film as writer-director is Django Unchained. You can see the show at kcrw.com. We go through all the movies. I mean, even the fight in Kill Bill Part 2, Beatrice wanting the rice. I mean, that's literally the way power is used to sort of get food across. And it's very much a part of Django Unchained as well. I mean,
one of the drawbacks of doing a movie about slavery in the antebellum South is I just can't put my characters in a restaurant and have them discuss the plot. And I literally remember because I hate to have like expositional sequences, and so I always try to overload them with other stuff, so you don't quite realize you're having the story told to you.
Because you do that at the beginning of Inglourious Basterds over the milk, which is another power thing.
And that's a big one as far as power is concerned. But it's like, oh man, things would be so easy if Schultz and Django could just go into a restaurant in Nashville and discuss their plans. But that's just not in the cards.
But they're doing it even in, you find a way in Django, in the eating on the campfire. It still happens. I mean, that way where people, in your movies, they feel European to me because people really take their time. I mean, nobody ever eats in a hurry in the movies. The way the conversations evolve in restaurants, the way you were talking about, people don't tend to rush.
It's actually, it's funny. One thing is, I remember I was talking to Kevin Costner about being in this film, and it didn't end up not working out and everything, but he was a really good guy. And he was asking me about how I work. And I was telling him, well, we go and, I like to rehearse some of the bigger dialogue scenes, so we can actually kind of play around with it in a 2-week rehearsal period. Nevertheless, when we get on the set, I'm very much a believer of, okay, forget everything before Tuesday if we're shooting a scene on Tuesday. Now it's about right now. And he goes, Oh, well, that sounds very interesting. Can you give me an example of that? And naturally, I couldn't think of that time. And then I thought later, I was like, oh, man, I had a great example. Why didn't I tell him that? But it goes into what we were talking about. I had a grueling audition period, casting period, for Inglourious Bastards because I was kind of like doing most of the reading with the actors because I had to really test, can they handle my dialogue? I ended up performing the piece so much I was actually a little worn out by the time we started shooting. I had actually given too much to the process. Now, you can't argue with results. It's one of the most, frankly, one of the best cast movies, not only that I've done, that I've ever seen. But boy, it cost me a little something. I gave so much to that process. There was like
You basically gave a game in the rehearsal, so when you hit the floor, you didn't have
not even
left.
rehearsal. The auditions, just auditioning the actors. But that's also part of it. Giving that much to auditions, it's sort of like a mini rehearsal. Because you're just testing the scene. You're finding what works, what doesn't work, what lines are good, what lines do I feel like there should be something more here, what lines are duds. And you start shaping the sequence of how it could be interesting dramatically with all these different people. And sometimes a lot of times you'll be auditioning an actor. Maybe you don't think, I probably wouldn't give this person the role. I doubt this person is the best person for the role. But we're having a good time here, so let me really test out my material. And put a different kind of light on it. Let me try a different emphasis here to see if it can go there. So it's while it's exhausting, it can be a very invigorating experience. One of the scenes that I really kind of nailed from doing it a zillion different times was the Shoshana scene in the restaurant.
Shoshana Landa.
Yeah, Shoshana Landa. And so I had this whole book out, and he was writing things as she's talking, and he's checking things as he's talking to her, and it was really very detailed because I had a chance to do it so many times. And I thought, wow, this is a really interesting interrogation. So then I find Christoph, and months later, it comes time to do the scene. When we get to do the scene, I realize I don't really want to do that. For the simple fact that those were my discoveries of me playing Landa. And that worked, and it worked really interesting, and it was actually fascinating. But we're not doing my Landa anymore. We've been doing Christoph's Landa for a long time. And you don't want to give him the end result of your journey. We have to do something completely different. And I knew I had to give him another piece of direction from everything that I had thought that I wanted to do to something completely different. So he sat down, we're ready to do it. He has no idea what I'm going to tell him to do. I don't really have any idea what I'm going to tell him to do. I just know what I don't want him to do, which is jump to an end result. And I just say, I want you to devour the strudel. I just want you to just concentrate as you say your lines. You're talking to her. I don't want the audience to know, do you know? Do you not know? It can all be conjecture. I don't know if you know. I don't want you to necessarily know if you know. I don't want you to necessarily make a super decision as far as that's concerned, at least not one that's going to be coming across. I want you to do one thing and one thing only. I want you to eat that strudel. Concentrate on eating the strudel with gusto.
Wow.
And it was one of those very directable actor things. And then the dialogue just took on its own life. Because it wasn't about staring, it wasn't about playing games, it wasn't about anything. It was about the food.
It's really almost an actor's term. It's basically playing a goal. His goal is to eat the strudel, and everything else is just a consequence of that.
Absolutely.
We'll take a break. We'll take and come back and talk about Django Unchained eventually. It's The Treatment, Mike. This is Quentin Tarantino. There's more to come. Stay with us. Welcome back to Fun with Food. My guest is Quentin Tarantino. We're talking about his new film, Django Unchained. It's The Treatment, which you can hear at KCRW.com. Django Unchained, for the audience who've been waiting for the first half of the show to hear you describe it, because I'm sure you haven't done it enough in the past 3 weeks. What is Django Unchained about Quentin Tarantino?
It's me throwing my hat in the ring about doing a Western. I've always wanted to do one. And I always knew that when I did one, I had wanted to have contain the aesthetics of spaghetti Westerns, because I'm a big fan of them. They're some of my favorites. But I also wanted to always tell a story that deals with the slave narrative and deals with the antebellum South during slavery times. And I thought these two situations could go really good together. So the story is about an ex-slave. Slavery's still going on, and he becomes a bounty hunter. him and his wife, as punishment for running away, him and his wife were sold off in two different directions. And so so now that he's got some money, he's got his bona fides as a professional, he's trying to track her down and get her back. And she is in the pit of the antebellum South, Mississippi. It's an odyssey for Django. It's a big journey.
And Django is played by Jamie Foxx, his partner in
Crime.
I want to say crime.
No, not crime, yeah.
I don't think it was crime at all. His partner in, let's say, Retribution.
Yes, exactly.
Is Christoph Waltz, who plays Schultz. As you mentioned before, Leonardo DiCaprio is Calvin Candy, as you said many other places, the evilest slave owner that ever was, and thank God for that. And Samuel L. Jackson is his aide-de-camp, if you can have an aide-de-camp who's also basically a house servant.
Well, yeah, but
and Kerry Washington is Django's wife.
But, one of the things I find interesting is, there was when we were doing the movie, there were some naysayers who had read the script that were complaining that the Schultz-Django relationship is the same old white savior, does everything. Black guy who should be the lead is just a sidekick. And I was really sensitive to that criticism because, one, especially in the entirety of the movie, I don't feel that in the entirety of the story, even in the script form, that was not the case. In particularly, I was, I go, well, guys, before I understand where you're coming from, having watched Cry Freedom, about why you people would be sensitive to something like that, and I get that. And having seen Glory and having seen a lot of things, I can understand the sensitivity of that because you've been led down this road many a time before. Got it. But that's not the case here. But you also have to understand, before I'm even doing a black movie in that regards, I'm doing a Western. And one of the staples of Westerns is the old experienced gunfighter who has the mentor role, teaching the younger man who usually has some sort of mission he has to accomplish, how to be a gunfighter, how to do what he needs to be able to do to carry him through the rest of the story.
And he's also teaching the mechanical skills of being a gunfighter.
Absolutely. Whether it's Kirk Douglas teaching William Campbell in Man Without a Star, or it's Brian Keith teaching Steve McQueen in Nevada Smith. I wanted the story of Django to not be the story just of a hero, but he had to become a hero. It's the story of the making of a hero. That first hour is his origin issue.
Yes, exactly.
It's his origin issue. And I even remember talking to Jamie, literally saying these words. Jamie Foxx, who plays Django. I even remember saying, you can't be Jim Brown too soon. You got to grow into him. He's not Jim Brown at the beginning of this movie. It's very important that Django is 6th from the 7th in the back of the chain gang. He's no different than any of these other guys. But when they go to Mississippi and go to get his wife, that's when the balance of power starts to shift.
It's the treatment. My guess is Quentin Tarantino, who's being very careful about not swearing on public radio. We're talking about his new film, Django Unchained. You can also see the show at KCRW. Here's my question for you. I think one of the reasons maybe people are responding to this is you're doing something you've done in other movies before, but you're doing it in racial terms, and it's hard to not, in the context of slavery and this kind of cruelty, it's hard to countenance this thing. You tend to present these heroes who are suffering in this way, or heroines, without irony. They don't have that kind of ironic relationship with the audience that Schultz has, that Aldo has in Inglourious Bastards. I mean, even the people who surround them tend to have an ironic relationship with the audience. Your heroes, your protagonists tend to not have that. In this case, I think that you can't get past the archetypal relationships to see that.
I hear what you're saying, but to me, that's just as part and parcel to what's going on insofar as, the other character that I've written that Django is similar to is Uma Thurman's character, the bride. And their concerns are, they're very sincere, and there is no ironic distance
to their concerns. In Inglourious
Basterds. True that. Okay, absolutely. In all three of them. I do kind of connect the bride and Django more because they are in both of those cases, they're the one time that I actually have a lead character. But nevertheless, but you're right though. They're so sincere about what they're trying to do, and what they're trying to do is so not a laughing matter. They don't get the fun to pontificate, and they don't want to tell. They're not wordsmiths about everything that they're trying to do. They're too busy doing it.
And the fact is, and I want to ask you about where these characters come from because they tend to be the characters who feel the deepest and go for this transformation, they set out to be one thing and are forced to become something else.
Well, also, yes, exactly. And also, but, something I'm just thinking about right now, though, is as far as the capacity for flippancy or analysis, they're too scarred. They're too scarred by events and have too much to accomplish to be flippant or to even be analytical about what they're doing. They all carry horrible scars. They've seen horrible things done to them by the people that they're dealing with, by their foes. They know this is no laughing matter. The bride has that scar on her stomach where her baby was carved out of her. She thinks her baby's dead. She saw the dead people at the wedding chapel. Django has seen the pain vested upon him. He's seen Broomhilda be whipped. He has the scars himself, to prove it. He survived being walked from Mississippi to Texas right before the movie starts. That's a movie unto itself.
But see, to me, these are the archetypes that exist in your movies. Mm-hmm. And I think people, in terms of talking about them being violent and cynical, there's always a kind of a beating heart of innocence in these movies. Mm-hmm. This person who's the hero or the protagonist, let's say, because it's often not a man, as a matter of fact. Mm-hmm. But that person is a person who's the most vested in getting through and trying to become the person that they used to be. Mm-hmm. They really want to get back to that and recapture that. Mm-hmm. But placing that in slavery puts a really interesting burden on the audience, though, doesn't it?
In every way, you're supposed to be on Django's journey. You're on Django's side, and and it goes without saying that white people and black people both are supposed to be identifying with Django. His victory is your victory. When he does what he does, you're cheering for him. You're happy for him. Nevertheless, Schultz is the closest thing to a 21st century perspective. Everybody else involved in the slavery times knows exactly how it is. Calvin Candy knows exactly how it is in Mississippi. Schultz can be a little ignorant about it being from Germany, and he can be a bit of an other because he comes from a different type of aristocracy. But just exactly like that, the way Schultz intellectually understands the horrors of slavery, the way many people in the 21st century intellectually understand the horrors of slavery, agree that, oh, God, it was bad, obviously. But it's intellectual. They're not faced with some of the horrible depravity that took place there. And so just like Schultz, the audience, once you're actually put down in Mississippi and see the sadness and see the despair and see the grotesque violence and even the pseudoscience rhetoric that accompanies it all and actually gives you makes them feel okay about it.
Yeah, it's a way of providing a rationale.
It's shocking. There's a painful section in the movie that happens, but it's part of the journey, part of Django's journey upriver before they get to Candyland. And that's meant to put you in the antebellum South at that time and deal with the depravity of it. And at one point in time, those sequences were even rougher. The Mandingo fight and the dog sequences, they were even rougher. I scaled them back a little bit because I screened it in front of a couple of audiences where I'd taken the movie about as far as we could on our own, and we actually need to start watching it with an audience. And all my movies kind of hop back and, kind of ride a roller coaster of different emotions. I hate to use the roller coaster metaphor, but it's something that comes to my mind right now. Well,
they're basically sort of push-pulls, so moments of extreme, and then there's comedy, there's adventure, there's but in all these aspects, comedy, adventure, suspense, melodrama, romance, whatever, they're moments of extremes.
Absolutely. But the thing is, more than most, because some of the stuff is so loaded, and you don't have other genres really to kind of fall back on. There is forging a almost new genre in this movie. And that's not trying to be too highfalutin. It's just there's elements of other genres in this movie, but this is kind of going its own route.
Well, nobody's ever made a big budget movie about slavery before.
Exactly, and not done this way. I mean, there is an aspect in the case of Inglourious Basterds. There's a whole plethora of both Holocaust TV movies and World War II action adventure movies that have done the work for me. So I don't have to show everything in that. You've seen the other movies. I can just hint to it and get down to my deconstruction. I have to take you there. There's not a bunch of other movies for you to think back on when it comes to Django. I need to set you up with it. And so the thing is, because of all that, this movie has a big, I have a lot of different emotions. I have a lot of keys that I want the audience to sing in. There is an aspect that I really do feel, if my movies are working to the best of their ability, that I feel like I'm a symphony conductor and the audience's emotions are my orchestra. That's the symphony. So I watched the movie with an audience with the rougher, more, Schindler Listy kind of scenes, taking you into the heart of the cruelty of slavery, where they were far rougher. And no 2, 3, 4 ways about it. I just traumatized the audience too much. I didn't lose them completely. But here is the thing. If the audience does one thing at one point, then just know that I will have thought that screening that night was a complete success. If they don't do this, then it wasn't a success. And that is, at the end of the movie, there's this like funky FDR shot that it's the only way to describe it. I'm talking in code, but that's okay. If you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's this funky FDR smile that Jamie Foxx's Django gives. If the audience bursts into applause at that moment, I've done exactly what it is I want to do. If they don't, or if it's muted, well, then that's not a good screening as far as I'm concerned. I did not pull it off. They could have still enjoyed themselves, but that was a kind of, it's depending on how much they make noise, it's a failure or not. But if they explode with applause or laughter or whatever, I've done it. I've done exactly what it is I wanted to do. And they just weren't doing it. The responses were too qualified because I traumatized them too much. And so then I had to just take that down a little bit so I could get all my flavors in there. And just make it so the experience it was tough, but it wasn't so grueling, it wasn't entertaining, and I couldn't get them back. Because there also was even something else going on about it. It wasn't just the horribleness. They were a little mad at me because they had been enjoying the movie up until then. And, it's not about getting rid of the bad stuff. It just, I have a higher tolerance for viscera than most people, and they couldn't handle it.
Based on as many giallos as you've seen, I know you do. We're out of time. Quentin, it seems like the only time I see you these days is when I'm interviewing you, so thanks for at least doing that.
They're making a movie. Give me a break.
Fine, I'll give you a break. My guest, you may know him as the conductor of the U.S. Orchestra. He's also best known as the director of the new film Django Unchained, Quentin Tarantino. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, too.
Our recording engineer, KCRW in Santa Monica, who also mixes the show, is J.C. Swadek. Is edited and produced by Jenny Radelat. I'm not traumatizing anybody. I'm Elvis Mitchell. It's the treatment.